My name is Jill. I work at a global public relations agency in New York. Public relations is kind of hard to define, but essentially you're trying to persuade different audiences to take a particular course of action. So it may be to buy a brand of toothpaste, to travel to a certain country, to vote a certain way. And that's sort of confusing because a lot of people say, well, isn't that what advertising does? And the difference is that in PR, you don't just push a message out and buy a space in a magazine or on television. You have to actually create something that's going to be compelling enough that people want to engage with it, and you may send that out through a newspaper reporter and convince them to tell your story, or you may put a viral video on the web, but you have to make it compelling enough that people are actually going to click on it and watch it. Every time we're hired, my PR agency is hired to work on a campaign, we have different objectives, but we'll sit down with that company and think about what they want to achieve, and that could be building awareness, it could be educating an audience, it could be getting them to buy a product, and depending on what that objective is, you would develop certain tactics for the campaign to achieve that objective. So one of the campaigns I worked on was for a global healthcare company, and they were trying to convince young people to get vaccinated for hepatitis B. So sort of a tricky challenge, and at the time hepatitis B was known to be a disease of healthcare workers. So young people had no idea that it was something they should worry about, but there was evidence that it was actually sexually transmitted. So we had to educate 18 to 24-year-olds about this disease and convince them that it was something they should get vaccinated for. So what we did is we enlisted some MTV artists to create some really cool, sexy graphics and make it kind of hip to be vaccinated. We came up with a tagline, which was "Get the facts and get the vax." And then we enlisted some celebrity spokespeople. We work with college health clinics. And we had sort of a number of different ways that we went at college students and got them interested and got them to get vaccinated. A typical day working on that project would be first to just sit down with the team who's working on the campaign and figure out who we were trying to reach, in this case young adults, and kind of look at all the things that interest young adults at that time. You know, what do they read? What music do they listen to? Where do they go? Who do they hang out with? What websites do they go on, etc. And then around that we would have a brainstorm and try and come up with an idea. Well, this is how we can get them to pay attention to what we're coming up with. And then after sort of you come up with an idea, you present it to the client. So a lot of the things we do are created and then presented and sold into clients. So that could be on a conference call, in-person meeting. We usually have to create a presentation that that will walk them through and show them graphics and get them it's like a sales job to some degree in selling your ideas. And then after you get approval on an idea, you kind of hit go and you have to execute on that idea. So that may be calling up an agent to try and get a celebrity spokesperson. It might be writing a press release or educational materials about what hepatitis B is in this case. It could be, lots of meetings with your team and sort of figuring out the best route. But no 2 days or two campaigns are the same, and I find that every time I work on a campaign, it has something I've never done before. Like over 15 years, that's never ceased to amaze me. I was an English major in college, and as an English major, I learned a lot of skills that really helped in my career in public relations. Some of those being just thinking analytically and critically about things, and a lot of times in PR we have to do research, and you have to not just pull the facts and put them in a list, but you have to kind of think about what they mean and know how to problem solve and figure out what the next step is based on what you just found out. And you're not necessarily going to check in with someone every step of the way, so you want to have those kind of critical thinking skills. The other thing is writing is hugely important in PR, more than I think any other kind of communications career. And it's not just creative writing, and there is a lot of creative writing, but it's also business writing and persuasive writing, which I think I learned a lot as an English undergrad. I got my first job in public relations after having had 2 internships as an undergrad. And then when I graduated, I started researching some of the top public relations agency. At the time, I went to the library. You guys can all go online onto the website, but I kind of looked at the top 10 or 15 PR agencies with offices in New York, and I wrote letters based on what jobs they had available, and sometimes it was in one category or another, and one specialty or another, and I would gear my letter toward that one or the other. But based on that, I got some interviews and was able to get a job. For those interested in a career in public relations, you should just know that it's really using both your left brain and your right brain. So you're using your creative thinking in almost every aspect of your job, but you're also being an analytical thinker and using those skills that you've probably developed as an English major, and they're both equally important in everything you do in the field of PR.